Welcome to Direct Response Playbook. My name is Travis Ketchum, founder of Campaign Refinery, here with, as often, not as necessarily as always, but as often with David Cartolano. How's it going, David?
Hey, great to be here, Travis.
Yeah, so we're going to cut right to the point today because you're probably here because you're like, I do email marketing or my boss does email marketing, and we're trying to figure out what the heck is a good open rate because I don't even know what the benchmark is. I know what I get, but I don't know what a good number actually is. And well, the truth is that varies quite a bit, don't you think?
Absolutely. Especially by industry. I always warn people, do not Google what a good open rate is because you're just going to get super confused and get crazy stats from all different places.
Unless you're clicking on our article about what is a good open rate, and we actually break it down by industry. So I'll actually
And that
include.
was my next thought. Yeah, you read my mind.
Yeah. So we'll have a link to that down below if you want a breakdown by specific industries. But I think the general theme here, though, is that there's benchmarks of what the average is, and then there's benchmarks about what will actually lead to sustained high quality success. Because your question that you're probably asking that brought you here by what is an open rate or what is a good open rate, you're probably really coming at it from a what is an industry average open rate, right? But who wants to be average, right? That's boring. Yeah. So
I
so
like
let's
it.
let's go down the just some examples and kind of get some rough industry averages, if that works for you. I've got my notes here off to the side,
Go
so
for
I'll
it.
just hit a couple of these to kind of give people an overall idea. And these numbers are aggregated from multiple other email service providers, but they very closely mimic what we see at Campaign Refinery as well. The general rule of thumb, by the way, across all different industries is that the average open rate is approximately 34%. When you hear that, David, does that surprise you?
No, not really. It's
Yeah,
low for me, but I
agreed.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so obviously, as you can imagine, depending on your industry, right, the audience that you're serving is either more technically inclined, less technically inclined, more addicted to email, less addicted to email, right? So like, for example, in real estate, the average is 35%. So just a hair above average. Whereas you see something like sports, arts, and artists, they make it a lot less email. So you have a lot less competition in your inbox. They're actually north of 40%. They're like 41 and
Mhm.
42%. On the low end, you see things like technology and marketing, things where they're very aware of email, they hammer it, people are on a lot of email lists. And so those are more in the 20s. So that kind of gives you the spectrum of the industries. Again, we'll link because I don't want to bore you with going through every single possible category of email. But if you want to take a look at the grid that we've put together and aggregating the results, you can take a look. But you can know that in general, it's kind of between 25 and 40%. But that's not the same as being really successful and sustainable, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think the rule of thumb for me is to get it as high and as consistent as possible. Because, you wrote an email and it has a 95% open rate. Fantastic. But the average open rate at the company is 27%. It's like, well, then an 80% open rate isn't a good open rate if it only happens once.
Yeah. We should probably also pre-qualify about the different ways that open rates can be measured, don't you think?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
hearing an
Yeah.
average number and hearing a good number, well, that might not be apples to apples when you're looking at your own numbers because it depends on how your own email tool is calculating that, right? So you want to give them a quick breakdown about some of the different ways that open rate can be measured and why there'd be any variance there at all?
Yeah. So open rates, one of the things that Apple has done is they have introduced some privacy measures. And I promise this does relate to open rate because what those privacy measures do, if I'm explaining it without the tech stuff, they kind of put a postman at your front door, and that postman will take the email, open it to make sure there's nothing like scary or bad inside, and then it will hand it off to you, which that's going to tell the post office that, oh yeah, Travis totally opened his email, but we're not sure whether or not Travis opened the email or the postman standing on the front porch of Travis's house opened the mail first, gave it to Travis, and then Travis went, nah, I'm not interested in reading it. So that's something that might raise your open rates higher, even if the person hasn't read, which is why, again, my rule of thumb is get it as high and consistent as possible, just in case that, 40% open rate, it might actually be a 35% open rate or 30. So get the number as high as you possibly can.
Yeah, we find that float to be approximately 10 to 15% bump on overall open rates that are attributed to, and of course this varies, right? How many of your users use Apple devices and Apple Mail, right? There's some caveats there, but generally speaking, it's about a 10 to 15% inflation of what the old open rate number used to be. So that's definitely important to keep in mind. What about unique versus total opens?
Yeah, so unique versus total opens is when a unique open is when one person opens the email, right? But if that person maybe wants to read the email another 4 or 5 times, well, that's going to show up, right, in total opens. So really something that I like to focus on in my list management, whether it's myself or my previous clients, was unique opens, because I want to see how many people total are opening the emails. And I'm not too interested in how often Kathy wanted to read the subject line 16 times, because that throws off the data.
Yeah. And this is an important distinction because not every email tool chooses the same path. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, because if your email provider shows total opens, you might be looking, hey, I get a 43% open rate and the industry average for my industry is 35. I'm killing it. Well, if it's a total open rate, you might actually be 27, so you actually could be below the benchmark sort of average. And knowing that it's unique versus total is a big deal, because you want to focus on those uniques, because that gives you a more accurate apples to apples measurement, right? And then also accounting for mailbox privacy protection from Apple as well for that little bit of drift. So once you understand that difference, then you can say, okay, am I above or below the average in my industry? And then take that information and make a qualified decision. Now, we at Campaign Refinery, who's sent billions of emails, we focus on helping our customers essentially double their industry average. And so as a result, for us, the floor for what we consider a healthy open rate, unique open rate, is 30%. So I mentioned before, there's average industries that their average number is below 30%. That is not deemed good enough by our standards for any industry, right? And the best senders often float much higher. So I know what our target is.
Right.
But when you're working with individual clients, David, what are you usually aiming for, let's say, an average broadcast to perform at?
Yeah. If I get anything below 40%, I'm pissed. Something is seriously wrong. Either the subject line was a complete flop, or we have a serious deliverability issue going on. So it's 40. And it doesn't happen too often if you're keeping the proper deliverability practices and you're using an email service provider that's got the infrastructure in place to get you good open rates. Then yeah, and you're producing content people want. Then yeah, 40% is not unreasonable at all in any way. That is the minimum.
Yeah, for a normal email, and I'm putting that in quotes because you should be hoping to overperform that at least half the time.
Yeah. That is the floor. And some of you listening to this or watching this might be saying, well, David, Travis, I have an email list of 30 people and I'm getting 60%. All right, great. Some of you might say, I have a list of 300,000 people, but it's okay that I'm getting 20%, right? In my experience, no. I've personally met someone who he had a list of 1.5 million people and was getting industry average like 34% open rate, right? So there's really no excuse to be being complacent with lower open rates just because you have a quote unquote big list.
Well, to put in perspective, one of our higher volume senders that sends around 60 million emails on one of their domains per month, their average is 57.5% open rate, uniques. Okay. So it all depends on how you design and how you create your list. But what we're really trying to cut at here, I believe, if we're going to distill it for you, is that the industry average is around 35%, but you should probably be aiming for 45 to 55% to be a normal broadcast segment. And if you aren't achieving that, then you should probably take a look at the way you're segmenting, how you're cutting your list down, and those kind of things. We've got other videos and content about those topics specifically, so we're not going to dive too much into that. But just know that to be healthy, you need to be at least 30% unique open rate. To be successful, you probably want to be more in the 45 to 55% range. Would you say that that's a fair benchmark,
That's
David?
perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Because then when you're at 50%, or anything above 50%, you get to brag to all your email marketing buddies or your boss that more people are opening your emails than not. And if they talk about the Apple privacy, you go, yes, I get it, but the number's pretty cool, right? And that's just shoot for as high as you can.
Yep. And the quickest little knob you can turn there is if you're not getting that, you should probably be reducing who you're sending to people that have more recently engaged with you. That's the lowest hanging fruit I can give you. We're going to have a whole long video about email deliverability guide, so definitely go to that if you're looking for ways to optimize that. But for now, these are the numbers that kind of give you a starting point and a benchmark of what's healthy, what to shoot for. And so you can at least make an analysis and a judgment call on, am I doing well or do I have some work ahead of me?
Perfect.
Cool. Well, thanks, David. Again, if you're interested in email stuff, we are an email service provider. We have the full blog post with all the categories listed down below, so I don't have to bore you while watching paint dry and list all the different categories and give you an idea about what the averages are. But if you're interested in newsletters specifically, David, I know you work with a lot of different customers doing a lot of different things, but I know newsletters are your jam. So where can they go to learn more about running a successful newsletter that does get those industry-beating open rates?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to wealthyinbox.news for my newsletter on selling and exiting newsletters, right? And this deliverability stuff plays a huge role in that. Or if you'd like, if you'd like, you can go to wealthyinbox.com as well. And there's much more information there around what we do at Wealthy Inbox. And you can give that a quick Google search.
Cool. Well, if we gave you some value, subscribe if you want to know more about email marketing. Until next time, talk to you soon.